And one of the objectives of the Climate Action 100 is for these focus companies to reduce their emissions. Is that correct?
Climate change is something that is happening.
Would you please answer my question?
Well, I found a study that actually CalPERS did. You guys did this study. It's entitled Emerging Diverse Manager Data Report. Since inception, current diverse managers generally underperformed non-diverse managers in the asset class in the policy benchmark.
All companies on the focus list to have committed to net zero or gone out of business as investors are no longer providing them with capital.
Yeah,
Does that sounds coercive to me. Does it sound coercive to you?
it does not sound coercive.
You ever heard the phrase in the movies, it's a nice little business to be ashamed if something were to happen to it?
Well, I wish you could explain to us today why Tesla has an ESG rating of 37, Philip Morris had 84.
Getting rid of the internal combustion engine in 10 years.
Yes.
Where do you stand on hamburgers? Is 1.5 a week enough, or do we get more? Chairman Massey wants to know. He's got some of the best grass-fed beef I've ever had.
Happening in China and with slave labor.
Mr. Bienvenue, in your testimony, you state that, to be clear, this is engagement, not divestment. We would agree, which is why the report this committee put out yesterday came to the same conclusion. Where we disagree is that your engagement is designed to fundamentally change business and industries to the detriment of consumers in a matter which is indeed not collaboration, but collusion. CalPERS is a founding member of Climate Action 100. Is that correct?
Climate Action 100 Plus was founded by Ceres, and CalPERS was involved in its creation early on.
And CalPERS is a founding member of Climate Action 100, correct?
CalPERS is a founding member and a signatory to Climate Action 100 Plus.
And Climate Action 100 has 170 focus companies, 42 of them being oil and gas companies. Is that also correct?
Climate Action 100 Plus has 170 focus companies and 42 oil and gas companies where we come together and discuss ideas and make independent decisions on how we.
So my statement is correct. Is that right?
As I said, Climate Action 100 Plus has 170 focus companies, as I said in my opening statement, and 42 of them are oil and gas companies where we come together to discuss independent.
And one of the objectives of the Climate Action 100 is for these focus companies to reduce their emissions. Is that correct?
Climate change is something that is happening.
Would you please answer my question?
There's context to your question.
And one of the objectives of Climate Action 100 is for these focus companies to reduce their emissions. Is that correct?
Climate change is something that is happening.
Is that correct? Answer my question, please.
As I say, climate change is something that is happening.
Andrew Bihar, the CEO of As You Sow, testified in his deposition that, quote, an oil and gas company could not reach net zero while continuing to produce fossil fuels, unquote. And As You Sow President Daniel Fugere testified that, quote, ultimately fossil fuel use has to be reduced, unquote. And GFAN's co-chair Mark Carney testified to the committee that, quote, more than half of the world's coal reserves need to stay in the ground in order for the world to be in line with Paris, unquote. So for the 42 oil and gas companies that Climate Action 100 focuses on, the way for them to reduce emissions would be for them to reduce their outputs. Is that correct?
Can you repeat the question, please?
For the 42 oil and gas companies that Climate Action 100 focuses on, the way for them to reduce emissions would be for them to reduce their outputs. Is that correct?
What we focus on with the companies that we engage.
Why won't you answer my question?
I'm attempting to answer your question.
No, you're not. You're trying to avoid it.
What we focus on with the companies that we engage is for them to be long-term
and to reduce their outputs, correct?
We would never suggest that an organization that is an oil company.
Is CalPERS committed to pursuing policies which cuts fossil fuel outputs, even if that would increase prices on the American people?
CalPERS is focused on generating returns to pay pensions over generations.
And even if it makes it more difficult for them to put gasoline in their cars?
Again, our North Star is about producing returns to pay pensions.
That's not what you write, and it's not what you've testified to previously.
Do your investments include oil and gas companies?
Yes.
Is that one of your top areas, sectors of investment?
It is.
Do you include these investments because they make sense and are consistent with your fiduciary duty to make sure I can retire what you're managing?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you oppose restrictions on your investments or forced divestitures of any specific industries?
No, we do not.
Do you invest in a good cause?
I said I'm very proud of the work that I do. Yes, I invest in a very good cause.
And so I think there's some parallels between what's going on with ESG and DEI. You don't deny that CalPERS has a DEI agenda, right?
CalPERS is all about generating returns to pay benefits, and every topic that we approach is through that lens.
Well, does DEI improve the returns to your investors?
I think part of good governance of a company is having diverse perspectives brought to bear as they manage that company, and I feel strongly about that for the investment team that I lead. Also, we want diverse
Terrific.
perspectives.
And what is the evidence that you rely on for the belief that the DEI agenda will produce better returns? Is there any study, report, analysis?
You know, as an investor, I read research reports constantly. I probably read 5, 6, 8 of them a day. So over the course of my career, that's probably been thousands.
I know,
of
I'm
research
just wondering,
reports.
is there one that kind of sticks out in your mind? You can say, Congressman, I'm here to do good by these 2.2 million beneficiaries, and my embrace of DEI, this is what I can point to as the evidence that's helping them.
Every data-based study can tell lots of different things, and every data works that way. That's the way investing works. And remember that when we're focused on investing, we're focused on how we...
Mr. Bienvenue, you can either cite a study or you can't. You can't, right?
In the thousands of studies that I
Just
have
name one.
gone
Okay,
through,
well, here's
can't
what.
cite
I
a single.
found a study that actually CalPERS did. You guys did this study. It's entitled Emerging Diverse Manager Data Report. And I'm citing from let's see. I'm citing from the 6th page of report where it says, since inception, current diverse managers generally underperformed non-diverse managers in the asset class in the policy benchmark. Are you familiar with this report?
Can I see a copy of that study, please?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the Emerging Diverse Manager Report published by CalPERS.
Without objection.
I'm not able to show it to you now, but you don't have any basis to disagree with the agency you've been a part of leading, saying that the DEI hires aren't doing as well as the non-DEI hires.
As I say, when we think about diversity, we think about diverse perspectives being brought to bear on investment decisions.
Right, but okay, so those are two different things, Mr. Bienvenue, because on one hand, there's provide returns for my investors, and what your own data says is that your DEI hires underperform there. And then on the other hand, you say, well, these diverse perspectives are really important. But I worry about the market manipulation and the bullying, because as I review what CalPERS has put out under its own investment guidelines, you brag about the fact that you voted against 768 directors at the companies you invest in most recently, and then in the prior year, you'd only voted against 133 directors. So is CalPERS voting against people as directors for companies based on their skin color?
We take up every vote independently based on the merits of the vote itself.
Right, but do you ever consider like someone's skin color? Because it's pretty immutable. People don't choose to be white or black or Asian. They just are.
We choose based on what will make the best oversight.
You're under
for
oath
that
here,
company.
Mr. Bienvenue. Can you deny under oath that CalPERS is voting against directors based on the color of their skin?
I can tell you we make every vote based on what will make that the best board for oversight of that company.
Right,
Every
but
vote.
but the best board is actually not doing so well. So, Mr. Chairman, let's look at the scorecard. In the state of Florida, where we aren't pushing ESG and DEI, the Florida retirement system is netting a 7.5% notch for the fiscal year. May I enter that into the record?
Without objection.
And CalPERS reports only 5.8% for 2022 to 2023.
In your view, can dark money groups making baseless antitrust allegations have a chilling effect on legitimate business and investment activity?
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. In fact, I think that is the effect of this proceeding today, to intimidate companies that are trying to improve returns, reduce risk from doing so in favor of a specific industry that clearly has come together to try to weaponize Congress in order to help lock America into their product and to try to stifle innovation in new other forms of energy that are more amenable to sustainability.
Mr. Ellison, you've opined that you see no antitrust violation here. Have your fellow state attorneys general, some of them expressed the opposite opinion?
Some of them have.
Thanks, sir. There's something I understand called a signatory handbook. Is that right, Mr. Bienvenue?
I'm not sure about a signatory handbook,
bet
but there
you-
are signatories. to the
There
climate
are
action.
signatories. I understand the Climate Action 100 Plus was designed to harness the collective influence of those signers. Is that right?
To consider climate risk, not to, each investor has said.
Just to consider it, not to pressure anybody?
That's right. Each investor votes their own shares, has their own conversations, and needs to. I'm sure CalPERS has 100 staff that are advising their investment office. They are looking at independently, and they are not looking at what somebody else does.
According to the Climate Action 100 Plus work plan, what I read is that Climate Action 100 Plus was, quote, designed to harness the collective influence of its investor members in order to spur companies on the Climate Action 100 focus list of 170 disfavored companies to accelerate their emissions reductions. Is that right?
If there's a financial risk to those emissions reductions, that's right. Everything about the analysis of companies and investors is about, is there a financial risk?
But it further says that the initiative's goal is for, quote, all companies on the focus list to have committed to net zero or gone out of business as investors are no longer providing them with capital.
Yeah,
Does that sounds coercive to me. Does it sound coercive to you?
it does not sound coercive.
You ever heard the phrase in the movies, it's a nice little business to be ashamed if something were to happen to it? Isn't that kind of the same thing?
In fact, it is the opposite. The requests of the investors of companies is more disclosure, is adequate, appropriate information for consumers, for people investing.
Ms. Lamb, you wrote an update to your investors on January 2021, didn't you? It says, the 117th Congress is the most diverse yet. Equality is on the investor and corporate agenda, and the Black Lives Matter movement defined 2020 alongside a global pandemic. And here we are facing a second civil war, this one cultural, led by a pro-white, pro-Christian agenda. In other words, make America great again. Did you write those words?
That was a newsletter I wrote following the violent insurrection on the Capitol.
Do you think we're facing a civil war?
The context of that writing was around culture.
Do you think we're facing a civil war, ma'am? Will you answer that question?
From my perspective, we are pro-equality, pro-diversity, pro-religious freedom.
So you won't answer my question whether you think we're facing.
I'm sorry, what I was describing in that piece,
I'll ask you one more time, ma'am.
reacting to the current events was around culture.
Do you think we're facing a civil war?
I don't think we're facing a civil war.
Thank you, ma'am. I yield back.
Can you, like in plain English, give a little bit of an explanation about how climate risks can pose a threat to future retirees?
I mean, I think corporate history is littered with places where companies have taken short-term looks at generating short-term profits at the expense of long-term risks, whether that was legal risk, whether that was externalities, you name it. That has happened throughout corporate history. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that the companies that we invest in are not only focused on generating profits today, in this quarter, those pay our pensions now, but also in generating profits in 20 years, 40 years, 100 years, because that aligns with our liabilities, which are intergenerational.
But you do that through communication with institutional investors, proxy advisor firms, other shareholders, correct?
We share information.
So in other words, you collaborate with members of your investor network, correct?
Collaborate by some definition, yes, not as it's been leading to meaning something else. We work with a number of investors who look for information, background facts on the financial implications of climate change.
But you're aware that collaboration to reduce, and you just said limited collaboration, whatever it might be, the reduced production isn't a violation of antitrust law.
Yeah, this is...
Why is this different?
We are not making decisions for anyone. We are not bringing people together to make joint decisions. We are sharing information on the financial risk of climate, whether it's $95 billion to the U.S. economy, to the insurance sector. That's our role. That is not.
Are there repercussions for signatories who fail to abide by their commitments?
There are not.
Arjuna has also joined initiatives that pressure companies and clients to align with its values. For example, Arjuna previously submitted a shareholder proposal to Exxon asking them to accelerate the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and to disclose new plans, targets, timetables for their reductions. Is that correct?
Prior to this hearing, my counsel sent a letter to Chairman Jordan and Chairman Massey and had conversations with both counsel for the majority and counsel for the minority regarding the fact I will not be answering questions about the litigation between Arjuna Capital and Exxon.
So when you ask that they accelerate the reduction of CHG emissions, you're asking them to reduce production of oil and gas, isn't that correct?
Prior to this hearing, my counsel sent a letter to Chairman Jordan and Chairman Massey and had conversations with both counsel for the majority and counsel for the minority regarding the fact
I'm not sure how answering these questions could get you in any hot water.
Trying to understand why we are here. Ms. Lubber, do you make money for the people who work with you?
No, it's on. Do I make money from people?
Do you make money for the people who work with you? Are you helping them make money? A return on their investment?
Indirectly. We certainly do an analysis of financial risks of climate change.
Ms. Lamb, do you help the people that are your clients make money?
Absolutely.
Mr. Bienvenue, do you help the people who are in your pension fund make money?
Absolutely. Over 20 and 30 years, our returns are in the 6 and 7+% range, in line with our assumed rate of return.
And Mr. Bienvenue, are you fireable? Meaning if you don't make money, can the people you work for get rid of you?
Absolutely.
Ms. Lamb, are you fireable if you don't make money?
Absolutely.
And Ms. Lubber, if you're not providing advice that helps people make money, can they get rid of you?
Absolutely.
So if it became clear to you that for those firefighters and teachers and janitors and everyone else, that you could get maximum return on investment safely by investing in a fossil fuel company, would you?
We are invested in fossil fuel companies. It's part of a diversified portfolio for us. So yes, anything that will generate returns to pay benefits.
Would you encourage that, though?
We are all about generating returns.
Or would you try to change the focus of that company? Would you have meetings and shareholder resolutions, et cetera, to replace boards of directors?
We want every company that we invest in to be sustainable and to generate profits now, but they must generate profits 20 years from now and 40 years from now.
If you had two companies and one of them offered a lower return of investment for those firefighters, teachers, janitors, et cetera, and one was a climate-based company, a wind turbine company, like Ørsted, for example. I don't know if are you invested in Ørsted?
I'm not sure. We own 10,000 securities across.
Okay, it's a big one. It's a big Danish company with wind turbines, but you're invested in some wind, I would imagine. Am I correct?
We are.
Okay. And you know that wind requires subsidization. You have to subsidize wind. And even with the billions upon billions of dollars of tax dollars of those firefighters, teachers, and janitors, their money going in to subsidize these foreign companies, they've been having a really tough time and not really returning on investment. Are you aware of that?
As I say, every decision that we make when we invest is about generating long-term returns to pay pensions.
So you're good, man, you're good. Seriously. I'm asking you a specific question. If you had a company that was faith-based and you could invest in that and it gave a good return, as opposed to a company that fit into more of your values, what would you do?
Every investment is about how it fits into that large 10,000 plus security portfolio and how that portfolio can generate returns to pay pensions. And every decision we make is through that lens.
Do you think that this committee should take legal theories that are funded by big oil at face value?
Absolutely not. And I can tell you that in Minnesota, we posted returns of 8.9%, and we do employ ESG principles. So in terms of success, I think your point is very well taken.
trying to understand what goes into an ESG score. Mr. Bienvenue, are you aware that last year S&P Global gave Tesla an ESG rating of 37 out of 100, while at the same time giving Philip Morris a rating of 84 out of 100? You familiar with
I'm not aware of that. I will tell you that for us, ESG ratings are part of the mosaic in the investment decision that we make, because it's critical for us that we consider all of those topics.
So you would consider this in your investments, these ESG ratings?
We consider every information that we can get in our investments. More information
So shouldn't
is
you
better
know
for an
what's
investor.
behind the fact that Tesla got less than 40 and a tobacco company got more than 80? Would that cause you to invest in the tobacco company over an electric car company?
As I said, every investment decision we make is a mosaic of hundreds and thousands of factors.
But you're testifying today, you have no idea how Tesla got half the score that a tobacco company got?
As I
You
said
know what goes into these ratings?
As I said previously, we own 10,000 companies, and each one has.
Do you own Tesla or Philip Morris?
We own Tesla.
Do you have any Philip Morris?
We do not have any Philip Morris.
Okay. Well, I wish you could explain to us today why Tesla has an ESG rating of 37. Philip Morris had 84 last year. Attorney General Ellison, if 3 airline companies got together and decided, let's say the management of the airline companies, and decided to reduce flights or to get rid of their frequent flyer program, would that be collusion? Would you pursue that?
Well, let me tell you, there's a lot of things that go into any antitrust case, and so just to answer your question with only what you've asked, I'd say I need to investigate more, but just on the bare bones of what you asked, it would get our interest.
Will get your interest. What if instead of the companies, their investors did this, or a shell company that all 3 of the airlines were a part of suggested to all 3 companies that they should reduce flights?
Well, there I can't go with you, because the only thing that, I mean, if you're talking about the folks assembled here and other groups that give information to companies, those companies are making independent decisions and making decisions in the interests of the people who they represent, whether they be shareholders or whether they be pension fund beneficiaries.
I'm glad in the first instance it would get your interest up, because that's why we're having the hearing here. We see evidence that these group of investors has conspired, collaborated, colluded, convened, whatever you want to call it. It's still pretty much the same thing, to reduce the outputs of their companies or the companies that they target.
So the subpoena back in June of 2023, you recall that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And you understand that the subpoena imposes mandatory legal obligations upon you and Ceres, correct?
Correct.
And you understand that failure to comply with a congressional subpoena can be punished with criminal contempt of Congress, correct?
Correct.
All right. The subpoena required you to produce all responsive information demanded by it, didn't it?
Correct.
Okay. And are you aware that back in October of 2023 regarding the portal, some 4 months after the subpoena, your counsel claimed that they were not familiar with it?
I'm not aware of that. What I will say in response to what you said is we have turned over 90,000 pages of documents.
3 spreadsheets.
We've asked, over a period of time over the last year, we've asked for direction on how to narrow the subject matter. That wasn't forthcoming, and we continued to turn over documents. As it relates to the spreadsheet you're talking about, which I'm not sure I've seen, but I believe I've heard about, that spreadsheet has hundreds and hundreds of documents noted on it, and we've asked the committee to give us more guidelines on which ones to turn over. Every document that's been asked for, we have turned over. I truly believe that is a formatting question, and clearly this Congress has bigger values than formatting, but we will go back to it. Our lawyers will talk to your lawyers. I believe we've turned over 90,000 plus pages, more than almost anyone, in response and in compliance with your requests.
Okay, we've asked for full access to the portal. Why have we not received that?
I actually have no idea.
Okay,
I
can you
do
commit to
believe
making the portal available to the committee today?
I will commit to trying to figure out why it is or why it's not.
What I want to know is, in order to reduce carbon emissions, do those 42 companies, oil and gas companies, on the target list, on the focus list, do they have to reduce production?
I don't think anybody knows how the climate transition is going to take place, whether
That's not what I ask you. Do they have to reduce production or not? They're in the business of making oil and gas, producing oil and gas. And I'm asking you, do they have to stop or lower, decrease oil and gas production?
As I say, I don't think anybody knows how the climate
Ms.
transition...
Lamb, what do you think?
I think that the oil and gas industry is facing enormous headwinds because of global emissions going up so much. And so I think that those companies are challenged and are going to have
I didn't ask if they were challenged. I didn't ask about headwinds. I asked a simple question. Do you think they have to reduce production of oil and gas?
I think each company needs to take a look at their business model and figure out how
So you don't think that
they're going to
they can increase production? You're okay with that?
I think that each oil and gas
If a
company
company
needs to take a
making
look.
their product wants to make more of the product, are you okay with that?
I think that the product of oil and gas companies is energy, and they can look and see how they can best produce energy for their customers.
So what do you mean? When you got 42 oil and gas companies on your focus list and you want to reduce carbon emissions, are oil and gas companies going to be allowed to encourage, engage, whatever term you want to use? Are they going to be able to make more oil and gas or less oil and gas? What do you think they should do?
Oil and gas companies can do whatever they want because...
Well, then why are they on your focus list? What are you trying to get them to do?
As investors that consider the financial risks...
Ms. Lubber, will you answer the question? Because the other two folks won't. Do you think
Yes.
oil and gas companies should be able to make more oil and gas, or do they have to make less?
They don't necessarily have to make less. Let me give you
So
an
do you guys all
example.
disagree with Mr. Khanna?
No.
I played Mr. Khanna's clip. Congressman Ro Khanna said to the CEO of Chevron, are you embarrassed? I'll read it. Are you embarrassed that as an American company, your production is going up? Should they be embarrassed because they're producing more? Should an oil and gas company be embarrassed because they're producing more oil and gas?
So oil and gas companies should limit their greenhouse gas emissions. That doesn't immediately mean they produce less. Oil and gas companies...
So it means later they produce less?
No, what it means is they
Are you disagreeing? Here's a question. Are you disagreeing with Mr. Congressman Khanna, or are you agreeing with him?
Please repeat what he said.
He said to the CEO of Chevron, are you embarrassed as an American company that you're producing, that your production's going up?
Yeah, I don't know.
Obviously wanting the production to go down.
Context. I do know
That's the
that oil and
context.
gas-
He went through all of them. All of them said, will you pledge to reduce production? I'm just asking you guys, as the guys who have 42 oil and gas companies on your target list, is it okay for oil and gas companies to actually increase oil and gas production?
If they could decrease their emissions in the process, I think they would be looked at differently. Regardless, so many of the oil and gas companies have decreased their methane emissions.
Anybody recently leave Climate Action 100? Any of your investment members, your member investors, anyone recently leave Climate Action 100?
About a dozen.
About a dozen? Can you
Yep.
name some of those companies?
Sure.
Small companies, big investors, small investors, who were they?
Some combination, but I would argue more, and there were some household names. I would also
Some big ones, weren't there?
Yep, BlackRock.
BlackRock's pretty big.
Morgan.
JP Morgan, that's pretty big.
In all of those
Vanguard.
cases, Vanguard, they've said they're going
State
to
Street.
continue fighting for climate risk
PIMCO,
reduction.
right? They're some of the biggest asset managers in the world. They all left your group. Why'd they leave?
Well, they all have different reasons. BlackRock is only
They all left at
partially.
sort of the same time. It must be something going on here.
They've heard a lot, they've got a lot of pressure from Congress and others that they should leave. BlackRock said to us, we're going to continue
We're not pressuring anybody. We just want to know what you guys are up to. 42 oil and gas companies on your focus list, and you can't even tell me if you want production of oil and gas to go up or down for them.
No, what I have said was that some of them have increased production but reduced emissions. The greenhouse gas emissions that
Are you for ending the internal combustion engine in the next 10 years?
that is the direction that our government is going, and I think it's the direction that the automakers have
You agree with
determined
that?
makes sense.
Getting rid of
yes.
the internal combustion engine in 10 years.
Yes.
Are you for reducing airline flight travel by 12%?
I don't know the numbers for airline flights.
Do you want it to go down?
Not necessarily. I don't think.
What about
okay?
the last question is, what about hamburgers? Where do you stand on hamburgers? Is 1.5 a week enough, or do we get more? Chairman Massey wants to know. He's got some of the best grass-fed beef I've ever had.
Freedom of diet.
What's that?
I said people should have freedom of diet.
Oh, so you don't agree with that?
Well, in all cases, there are other ways to fix the challenges.
Newsflash, Ceres is okay with us eating more hamburger, Chairman.
Eat what you would
Newsflash,
like.
Ceres is okay with that.
Eat what you would like.
I yield back.
If 2 or 3 companies were to share their prices or their strategy for pricing or how they went to market with another competitor, would that be an antitrust violation? I know you're not a lawyer.
As I've said before, I'm an investor, not a lawyer.
Ms. Lamb,
I'm not an antitrust.
right, but the basic definition that you'd have to pass the bar with is that sharing information between competitors inherently puts you in jeopardy of antitrust, particularly if that information allows effectively coordination of prices or other activities, including investment activities. Wouldn't that be true?
I really don't understand the premise of what you're saying. What we're doing, and the reason, that is we're investing our clients' capital for the long term, upholding our fiduciary duty.
Oh, you're investing for the long term. Do you sell stock on a quarterly or annual basis?
We rebalance our portfolio.
Okay, so you buy and sell regularly. So when you say long term, the reality is you both do long term and short term. And if something's a good investment today, you have a fiduciary obligation to consider it.
Says climate change is a systematic financial risk. And I'm not going to argue. Climates have been changing. We used to have ice ages, how it's contributed. We're not going to science. But you've noticed a lot of this new industry using a lot of slave labor, like in China or DRC in Africa. Are you willing to say that, if we want to decrease or whatever, change something with fossil fuels, we're willing to increase use of slave labor or Chinese operation without any transparency? Do you think you would do it at expense?
No.
So you're willing to bring more transparency? What's happening in China and with slave labors? Is your fund ever doing that, or you only worry just take down companies?
A strong tenet of what we do is seek more disclosure. And what you're
So you're willing to have more disclosure what on Chinese operations of companies that using that, or more disclosure what slave labor and using some rare earth minerals and using China? So you're willing to put that, because I haven't seen that.
Well,
so your fund is going to be as advocated for the boards to have more disclosures on that?
Absolutely. There is no justification. The practices that you're talking about are highly unacceptable, and I think they should be looked at and disclosed as well.
Without objection, the hearing is adjourned.